Did you know that St. Luke's University Health Network, based in the Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania, has been recognized by the U.S. government as the highest performing health system in the United States for quality? You heard right. St. Luke's #1 recognition affirms our status as the top leader among the most respected healthcare providers in the nation, including Houston Methodist and the Mayo Clinic. To state it simply, if you want to receive the best care when you go to a hospital, come to St. Luke's.
Welcome back into the Stone Zone. It was the morning of January 19th, 2019, when at 6 o'clock in the morning, 29 heavily armed FBI agents in full SWAT gear, wearing night goggles and brandishing fully automatic M4 assault weapons, surrounded my home at 6 o'clock in the morning. They came in 17 armored vehicles, a helicopter, and 2 amphibious units. As my friend Sean Hannity likes to point out, they were actually frogmen jumping off of these amphibious units onto the dock in my backyard, because I lived on the Isles in Fort Lauderdale at that time, also brandishing these assault weapons. As I say, they sent more men to arrest me for the first time, nonviolent alleged crime of lying under oath to Congress. Wasn't until November 3rd of 2020 that we learned the complete truth. You see, during the trial, my lawyers asked the judge for Robert Mueller's fully unredacted final report. All of the sections of the report that regarded me had been completely blacked out. The judge refused to give it to us. She said that she would review the report in her chambers and give us those sections that pertain to me. Somehow she forgot page 128. On page 128, Robert Mueller was forced to admit that he had found, in my case, no evidence of Russian collusion, WikiLeaks collaboration, or any other crime. He went so far as to admit that had he found that I was in touch with WikiLeaks, it would not have been a crime. It would have been consistent with my First Amendment rights. So my attitude about this new $1.8 billion fund is twofold. One, those people who were tortured, those people who were subjected to inhumane conditions of their incarceration in January 6th, I would like to see them compensated first. I think they deserve it more than anyone. My upcoming guest, Michael Caputo, is another one who's been put through hell. I think his biggest single crime was being a friend of mine. His second biggest crime was working diligently for Donald Trump. He's the first American to apply to this fund. He sent a letter to acting attorney Todd Blanche, a little premature, I think, mechanically, but symbolically extraordinarily important. We're going to talk a little bit about what he and his family went through when it came to the Russian collusion hoax, because I think it's important for people to understand. When they do this to you, they break you financially. In other words, I lost my home, I lost my health insurance, my life insurance, I lost my life savings. I had to sell my car. I sold my beloved electric guitar with which I put myself through college. I was gagged, so I couldn't speak in my own defense, making it very hard to raise money for your legal defense. And through my belief in God and being redeemed in the blood of the cross, I'm with you here today to talk about it. We'll be right back with Michael Caputo on the other side. And we're back in the Stone Zone. Michael Caputo is not merely a veteran of political warfare. He's also a patriot, a communicator of rare skill, a loyal friend, and a man who's paid an obscene personal price when he was a very young man that he was my driver, something he enjoys telling people. I've known him long enough to know the measure of the man and the incredible ordeal that he and his family have been through. And now he is the first person, I think largely symbolically, to apply to this new $1.8 billion fund that President Trump is essentially creating to compensate those who are the victims of political weaponization. The president sued the IRS for, I think, $10 billion. He could have won that lawsuit and put that money in his pocket. Instead, he settled the lawsuit to create this fund to help people, well, people like Michael Caputo. Mike, welcome to the Stone Zone.
Thanks, Roger. I heard you wanted to talk to me. The first thing I thought was, oh, I must be in trouble. Thanks for inviting me on.
No, look, you're all over the news, and I think that's a good thing. As we both know, the actual physical setup and logistics of this fund are not fully operational yet, but you are one of the first people who should be compensated. I thought it would be useful for our audience to recognize and understand what you went through, because beneath the armor of being a tough political operative, you're a devoted husband, you're a loving father, you're a man of deep faith. We've gone to Mass together on numerous occasions. But you're also an American who endured a vicious weaponized, the warped federal prosecutor prosecuting me, pounding the table and bellowing, "I am the law." I can't get that picture out of my mind. Give folks some idea of what you and your family have gone through.
Remember, Roger, we worked together on that campaign and, gosh, so many others. On the 2016 campaign. And, I developed a specialty in Russia, Ukraine, because the USAID sent me over there after the wall fell in order to get democratic electoral laws in place in Russia, Ukraine, and other places. I was there for nigh on a decade, and so, I naturally became interested in doing that kind of work again after the campaign. I remember I called you and I said, hey, I think I'm going to go over to Russia and see if there's something I could do to help bring our countries together again. And you told me that's the dumbest thing I ever heard in my life. I'll never forget that. And I said, why? And he says, don't you feel it? You say, don't you feel it? They're on us, Caputo. And you were the first one who told me that you felt like there was a Crossfire Hurricane kind of investigation going on. And indeed, it was going on for 9 months when you told me that. And everything went to crap from there. Not only am I married to a Ukrainian, I have all daughters, 3 young girls, and at the time a teenager, a 5-year-old, and a 7-year-old. And the attacks on my family were profound. We lost everything. Each one of my daughters suffered uniquely and terribly. But we lost our house. We lost our college fund for our kids. We lost our savings. I lost my business. I lost all my clients. And in the end, I lost my health with stress-driven throat cancer, head and neck cancer, and damn near died. I mean, the interesting thing is, Roger, my health and everything else fell apart. There are thousands of people just like me. You, my goodness, my sister, my dear sister, Nydia, your wife got the same stress-driven kind of cancer I did. We were watching it go on all around us, remember? And in the end, I think a lot of people didn't believe that there would ever be any kind of restitution. Roger, they spied on me because of my movie about Hunter Biden and Joe Biden profiting in Ukraine. They opened that in 21 when Joe Biden was inaugurated, within hours. And it wasn't closed. They were on me, surveilling me, spying on me until December 25, a year into the Trump administration. The FBI was secretly surveilling me. This is really wild stuff. And when, at the same time, Roger, a lot of people don't understand that. Well, I worked on the Trump campaign, not just 16, but 24, right? And I was put in charge in some ways, anti-weaponization policy. I think that's one of the reasons I was hired, because I was, of course, wrapped up in it. And I knew a lot about what was going on. And I must have written and marshaled 100 pages of policy research on the anti-weaponization policy front. And I'm going to tell you, at the end of 2023, about November, I think, I went to a policy meeting at the West Palm Beach headquarters, and they brought up an anti-weaponization fund. This fund has been thought through and talked about at the highest levels of the best attorneys in all of Washington, all the way to Milwaukee and the convention. Roger, you remember, the platform committee is made up of the best lawyers in Washington on the Republican side. They volunteer for a week, and those guys were talking about an anti-weaponization fund and how to fund it in Milwaukee in July 24. This is the thing people don't understand. Two things, very important. Number one, this is not an off-the-cuff, a seat of the pants kind of operation. The Trump team and some of the smartest lawyers I ever saw, I was there, right? They've been developing this since 2023, number one. And number two, it's the hardest thing is to get it across the finish line, as you can imagine. By the time I left the DOJ in May of 25, I was under federal investigation, and I knew it by then. So I left, and I started seeking my documents through Judicial Watch and going for it, trying to get it closed. But really, at that time, it appears now that Todd Blanche and Maine Justice was putting this together from the original idea, doing the most difficult part, running that ball the last 10 yards, because we couldn't figure out how to fund it, right? That's in the policy discussions. So I was very surprised when I woke up Monday morning. I didn't expect this. I didn't know it was coming. I probably shouldn't know. But there are those 2 points. Number one, good luck litigating this. Some of the smartest Republican lawyers I've ever met put this together. And number two, Todd Blanche took it to the finish line. And that's the hardest part.
Yeah, I give the acting Attorney General, Todd Blanche, enormous credit. Not just because he charged James Comey, the former FBI director, with his threat to kill the president, which is very clearly what it was, but his declaration in recent days that they're now seriously examining the 2020 election. Also, they are very serious about prosecuting those involved in the seditious conspiracy of the Russian collusion hoax, which morphed into 2 phony impeachments, which morphed into the theft of the 2020 election, which morphed into the so-called documents case, which morphed into Arctic frost, the greatest extra-constitutional abuse of power in American political history, spying on Republican senators, congressmen, and other prominent supporters. I think it's important people understand that your story is not just some abstraction. It's not just some legal footnote. It's not another, disposable headline in the fetid swamp of Washington gossip. It's actually the anatomy of lawfare in its purest and ugliest form. Yes. They begin with a political target, in this case, you. I've been through this myself. They attach suspicion to you through innuendo, then they drag you through investigations, subpoenas, interrogations, legal bills, public humiliation, endless leaks, and professional annihilation. Then, even if no charges are ultimately filed, which was the case for you, and no crime is found, they shrug and pretend, well, the process itself was not just the punishment, when in fact the process is the punishment.
Truly.
You have been an advocate for redress, and as I said, I don't know if you heard my opening segment, as much as I went through hell, as much as you and your family went through hell, I want to see those people who were abused on January 6th, denied due process, imprisoned in conditions that violate the Geneva Conventions. I really want to see those people get their due compensation out of this. To me, those people suffered immeasurably when, in fact, the entire January 6th thing was indeed a Fed-surrection.
I was with Ed Martin, serving as kind of like acting chief of staff when he was U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia, and all those pardons went down. And I can tell you there was discussion because there were some violent felons in there, right? There were some people that actually struck police, etc. And there was a discussion in the room like, listen, we need to move swiftly, or do we need to go through here and adjudicate them one by one? And swiftly was the answer, and they did it. Now we have a panel of 5 that they're putting together. I think the vast majority of the men and women who were abused in January 6th deserve recompense. But now they have a panel of 5 that can go through this, and they can set parameters. that they weren't able to do because the president promised immediate action and delivered it after Inauguration Day.
Folks, if you're just tuning in, you're listening to The Stone Zone. We're talking to Michael Caputo. Michael Caputo's career is remarkable by any standard. He's a Buffalo native, a military veteran, a skilled Republican strategist, a communications professional, and a longtime ally of one Donald J. Trump. Mike, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with more of Michael Caputo and Roger Stone on the other side.
This is the Stone Zone. Now, get in the zone. It's the Stone Zone.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him.
And we're back in the Stone Zone. We're talking to Army veteran Michael Caputo, who is a longtime policy consultant, a cancer survivor, who worked over at HHS under President Donald Trump to help the efforts to make America healthy again. Over his 40-year career, he served in various positions across Washington, including working for a man who belongs in the Football Hall of Fame, Congressman Jack Kemp. That's where I first met him. Later, the U.S. government sent him on a decade of international work in both Russia and Ukraine. That's probably why he became a target in the Mueller Russia collusion hoax. He served in senior advisory capacities in both Donald Trump's 2016 and his 2024 presidential campaigns, and then later as Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs at HHS during COVID. He was diagnosed with stress-driven metastatic head and neck cancer, which he has survived because he's redeemed in the blood of the cross. And now he is the first person in the country to, I think symbolically, but importantly, apply for redress from this $1.8 billion fund that Donald Trump has very generously decided to create to compensate those who are the victims of weaponization. I can't stress how selfless this is. Trump could have won a $10 billion lawsuit against the IRS for illegally leaking his tax returns. Instead, he settled, and rather than put the settlement money in his pocket, he's dedicating it to this fund. So I think that is an enormously selfless act. Michael?
It is, and I'll tell you, it's what we have to understand here, people listening and others. Somebody listening out there is afraid to come forward. It's been 9 years of sheer hell for many people. My FBI investigation just ended 4 months ago. They were spying on me for a year of the Trump administration and for 8 years before that. But Roger, anybody who interacted with you and with me, because we were under investigation by these weaponized political types. If you were my driver at some point, if you were my assistant at some point, et cetera, I'm finding people who were interrogated by the FBI during the first administration, friends of mine, and I didn't even know they got attorney's fees. My cameraman on my 2020 film on Biden's ripping off Ukraine. My cameraman just came forward recently and told me he was represented by counsel for a better part of a year while the FBI was interrogating him. These people have $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 in legal fees. They deserve recompense. They deserve restitution. For crime's sake, reimbursement. Right? There are, and let me tell you, Roger, you know this. There are thousands of these men and women who have suffered at some level, less than you, less than me, and God forbid Carter Page and Paul Manafort and Wally Turris and J.D. Gordon. Not much, but in reality, 25 getting your legal fees back when you had to sell your house and you're living in a trailer. That's something, by gosh. And that's what Donald Trump is doing here right now. It's not that he's out there looking to reimburse people who aren't really suffering that. The vast majority of the people that went through the weaponized attack on Donald Trump, they're suffering terribly. I've met people who lost their houses. I've met people that are being criminally prosecuted right now. This is an urgent situation, and a lot of people out there, not just my family, And God bless you, Roger. I know you went through a lot, not just your family, not just the people we know. When I was researching this issue for Donald Trump's 24 campaign, I got to know dozens and dozens and dozens of people who were just destroyed by a $50,000 legal fee. There are a lot of people deserving of this, and I'm real pleased to see the president and Todd Blanche taking this out there where they and getting a lot of slings and arrows for it too. By the way, Roger, if you're a Democrat, listen to the Stone Zone, and you want some recompense for the way the politically weaponized government abused you, you're a Democrat, I urge you to come forward right now and test the system. I bet you get your due in restitution.
Well, there's one other great thing about this, Mike, and that is it gives us a forum to point out that the only Russian that we talked to, the only Russian who was sent to talk to us, turned out to be an FBI informant. It's funny how Adam Schiff and Eric Swalwell made much of this. Oh, Stone and Caputo were meeting with this Russian informant until we revealed that Russian informant, who's going by the name Hank Greenberg, was actually an FBI informant in the country, probably for the specific purpose of trying to entrap us. Somehow that missed the mainstream media. They missed that minor point.
Yeah. They did. Also, a guy who was accused of murdering his business partner in Central America, a guy who is still here working for the FBI. 30 years an FBI informant, and somehow or another, Schiff missed that, didn't he?
Yeah, it's extraordinary. This is a guy who told me that he had vital information of great value to Donald Trump on Hillary Clinton. And I said, well, I'd have to see it to know whether it had any value. And he said, well, that's going to cost you $2 million. I laughed and said, if I had $2 million, that's not how I'd spend it. And he said, You don't understand. It's not your money I want. It's Donald Trump's money. I said, no, you don't understand. Trump has $2 million, but he's not spending it on opposition research.
Right.
One of the low points of the Mueller witch hunt.
Roger, and I mean, I will never live it down. That's one of the two things that I'll never live down. And that is that I told this Greenberg cat who called me, I said, I don't know, I'm up in Trump Tower. My buddy's Roger's down there in Miami. And I had you go meet with him. You showed up, and he had a red Make America Great Again hat on and a big picture of Donald Trump on a T-shirt. It was out of a movie. Well, it was just like the FBI. Let me tell you something. I understand this now, and the people who are listening should understand. Never, with the FBI, never assigned to conspiracy what you could blame on stupidity. That was one of the most stupid ops I've ever heard of in my life.
Well, if he was undercover, he was not very well disguised. I recall he was scrolling through his phone, showing me pictures of him and his girlfriend at various Trump rallies.
Right.
And in the end, my meeting with him lasted less than 10 minutes before I realized that there was nothing there to do or to be done.
It was so
they made much of the fact that I'd forgotten that I had even met the guy, but then they wanted to forget it entirely when he posted online proof that he was an FBI informant.
Yep.
One of the dumbest criminals I've ever met.
Yep. And I'll tell you, Roger. I don't know. I brought that idiot into our life just as a shrug. These clowns are everywhere. But really, it was a live operation going on right then. By the way, when you were sitting in that stupid restaurant in Sunny Isles, Florida, with this clown, right? As you sat there with that character, Lisa Page and Peter Strzok were having a little bit of fun on top of the desk in Mueller's conference room on the 6th or 7th floor of the FBI. That was the same era. Isn't it crazy to think about that now?
It is indeed. All right, we're going to have to wrap it up there. I want to thank my guest, Michael Caputo. I want to thank all of our listeners for tuning in to the Stone Zone today. Until tomorrow, God bless you and Godspeed.